Morning, brethren. Today, our thought for the day, our devotional, is from John's Gospel, John chapter 8 and verse number 7. There we read these words: "When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, 'If any one of you is without sin, let him be the first to throw a stone at her.'" And the her to whom he's referring is the woman caught in adultery. I'm sure you're familiar with the story. A woman who had been caught in an adulterous act is taken by the religious leaders and brought before Jesus, thrown down in front of him. They demand that Jesus confirm that she ought to be stoned to death according to the teaching of God's law. It's interesting that they didn't bring the man along as well, but that's something else. Jesus listens to what they have to say, and they keep on saying to him, "Isn't this so?" That's the idea when it says they kept on questioning him. "Go on, Master, confirm it. Tell us that we should take her out and stone her." And Jesus replies by saying, "If any one of you is without sin, let him be the first to throw a stone at her." Now, Jesus is not denying the law. He's not saying that sin should be punished. His purpose in these words is to get those who brought this woman to realize that they are just as sinful as she is. Yes, she has openly and blatantly broken the commandment, "You shall not commit adultery." And technically speaking, she should have been stoned. However, as Jesus taught earlier in his ministry, adultery is not merely the outward act. Adultery is also something that happens in the heart. And each one of the men that brought this woman, and it was men that brought her, had committed adultery many times in their heart. They were just as guilty as her. And Jesus gets them to look into their own hearts and to see that as with this particular sin, so with every aspect of God's law, they had broken it time and time again. And if justice was to be executed, if justice was to be carried out in strict accordance with the law, then not only should this woman be stoned to death, each one of them also should be punished. Now, how does that affect us? Well, brethren, I don't know what your eyesight's like. Mine isn't great. I need glasses to see properly. Sometimes it's very easy to see the sins of others and to highlight those sins, to draw attention to them even, and yet fail to see the sins that are in our own hearts. Sometimes even the very sins that we condemn in other people, we ourselves are guilty of committing them. Brethren, let us not think for 1 minute that anyone else's sin is greater than ours. We too are sinners. And although we may not have committed exactly the same sin as another person, it is only the grace of God that has restrained us. But the reality is that as far as most sins go, you and I have committed them all. We've been guilty of lying. We've been guilty of envy. We've been guilty of pride. We've been guilty of lust. We've been guilty of adultery in our hearts, if not literally. We've been guilty of theft. We have not given God what is his due. We've been guilty of hypocrisy. We've been guilty of all sorts of things. So let us be gentle and let us be gracious towards those who have sinned, because we need people to be gentle and gracious towards us because of our sin. If any one of you is without sin, let him be the first to throw a stone, says Jesus. May God help us to reflect on this throughout the day. Have a good day, folks.